U.S. Senate negotiators reach a deal on a border security bill, but can they convince House Republicans to pass it? Hello, I'm Anand Naidoo, and this is The Heat. Immigration is the major issue in the 2024 U.S. presidential election. After months of negotiations, key U.S. senators say they've reached a deal to overhaul the asylum system and manage the influx of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. Details are expected to be released this weekend, with a possible vote next week on a national security package that includes funding for Ukraine and Israel. For more, let's bring in our Washington, D.C.-based panel. Rina Shah is a political strategist and commentator and founder and CEO of Rilax Strategies. Douglas Sloan is principal of the National Capital Strategy Group and a Democratic strategist. Art Estopinan is president of the Estopinan Group and former advisor to the chair of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee. And Rafael Bernal is a staff writer for The Hill. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. So, Rafael, we have something of a deal in the U.S. Senate to enact tougher U.S. immigration and asylum laws. And as I said, there could be a vote as early as next week. We will know this weekend what that bill looks like. But what are you hearing about these proposals?
Well, the first thing I'm hearing is it's not going to come out tonight. So it's not going to be a Friday surprise. Which brings to the questions well, the big question over this deal has always been, where is it? What is it? And the what is it is important because while the question remains whether it can pass either the Senate or the House of Representatives, whether it'll even get a vote in the House of Representatives, the last question, and one that hasn't been asked much, is it good policy? And there are some things, Senator Sinema did give a preview of what's in there. The one thing that jumped out at me, there are several, but the one thing is the plan to, in statute, enact that asylum cases will be resolved, final asylum decision in 90 days. Now, if that's the case, I'm sure a lot of advocates would like to see that. They won't like that the asylum, that'll be harder to get asylum, but it's a resolution in 90 days would be great. But is there the funding to do that? Have these senators taken into account the infrastructure needed? One would assume so, given, for example, Chris Murphy, chairs Homeland Security Appropriations in the Senate, but this is a very tricky policy area. Congress has a very bad history on this, so it's healthy to have doubts about whether they will come up with good policy.
Right, you pointed to what could happen in the House of Representatives. That's the chamber where the Republicans have a majority. And you said there are big question marks over what happens to this bill over there, even if it will get a vote. So how likely is it to pass in that chamber?
I wouldn't bet on it. The speaker is against it. The Trump allies are against it. There are many progressive and Hispanic caucus members who are against it. And the numbers are really tight. There is a possibility for sort of a moderate coalition to outnumber all these other groups. But the question is, for the biggest question really is what happens to Speaker Johnson if he puts the bill up for a vote against his right flank's advice and consent. The worst that can happen to him, of course, is he gets booted like former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The best thing that can happen to him if he wants this bill to pass, and again, we don't know that, but he's indicated he's not a big fan. If he wants the bill to pass for whatever reason, the best thing is that for him is to build that coalition. But it is going to be very hard, and Democrats are going to face internal pressures. So I don't know how strongly Democratic leadership will be whipping, whether the White House will push them more than the Hispanic caucus or the progressives.
Right, Rina, Republicans have said that the border crisis is one of their top priorities, but the former president, President Trump, he holds no elected office, but he does wield enormous influence over the party. He says this Senate agreement is a bad deal. Let's listen to him.
You don't need a deal to tighten up the border and to make it secure. I had the most secure border in history. I didn't have a deal. I didn't have a bill. I said, no people are coming in. No drugs are coming in. We don't want to have human trafficking, which nobody even talks about.
So, Rina, if President Trump is not on board, former President Trump, I should say, what are the chances of this bill passing?
Well, right now it seems, with immigration being the political football it is this year, that there are Republicans who want to hear the former president out. They want to be helpful to him. And that would mean playing some political games, keeping the border very porous, open, allowing the Biden administration to continue to fail, as Republicans from both chambers have repeatedly said. Look, this was just this past week. We've seen the impeachment effort within the House, the impeachment effort of Secretary Mayorkas, our Homeland Security Secretary. That had some legs this week, and it really kind of turns this entire scenario on its head. What are House Republicans really thinking? And what they're thinking is that they want to continue to make the Biden administration look bad. They understand that Mayorkas cannot always act alone, that it is also up to Congress when these individuals arrive on American soil. You've got law enforcement who are going through established criteria, creating this process that's been established. These people they have these credible claims, and then they make it through, right? But the issue here becomes that how much of it makes sense to Congress, and that's where I think all of this gets very murky. Yeah. To the average person watching this, it almost doesn't make any sense, because it is a back and forth picture that you've got Republicans yelling at Democrats to do something about the crisis of the southern border. We spent all last fall listening to these GOP hopefuls. I'm talking about Haley, Christie, DeSantis, Ramaswamy, talk about how the Biden administration has failed. And yet here we sit in February of 2024, and these negotiations sound hopeful. Yeah. But I think that Republicans at the end of the day want to make it extremely hard for the current president to have any wiggle room on solving the crisis of the border.
Yeah, there is another issue, Rina, which is not connected to the core issue of immigration, and that is funding for Israel and for Ukraine. If this bill fails, what happens then?
That funding is in complete jeopardy as well, because look, we are in the era where all these bills sort of are not standalone anymore. Everything is getting piled together, and then you've got this very freshman speaker. He's just, I think he's in a sort of plumbing situation where he's that of a plumber, where he's seeing these leaks here, there, and everywhere, yeah, and he's not sure what to say or do. So he puts a Band-Aid on something, and the next day that issue arises. And so he has tried to be hard-lined, but again, we're seeing his rookie stripes come out, because we're just not sure how he can wrangle the GOP caucus within the House to get anything done that, again, is standalone. So you're putting in danger multiple streams of funding for various conflicts. And again, all this kind of makes, who look really bad? It's the current president, less so Congress. And Republicans understand that, because they understand it's a political year. So they're going to keep doing this playbook of making Biden look like he's the one who's failing everything, whereas Republicans have an equal hand in these bills failing as well, of course.
Yeah. Douglas, President Biden has been talking about this. He's calling the draft bill the toughest and fairest set of immigration reforms in U.S. history. Let's listen.
If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly. A bipartisan bill would be good for America and help fix our broken immigration system and allow speedy access for those who deserve to be here. And Congress needs to get it done.
So President Biden expressing support for the draft bill there, Douglas. But what about the progressive wing of the Democratic Party? I mean, how are they going to respond to a law which will give this president or any future president the ability to shut down the border?
Well, the progressives in the Democratic Party are going to have to understand that this country is faced with a crisis right now as far as immigration is concerned. We're seeing numbers of undocumented immigrants coming over the border that we've never seen before. It's unprecedented. And they also have to understand this is an election year. And if they want to be able to have any say-so in immigration policy and how these things are treated going forward, that they're going to have to get in line and play ball, so to speak. The main issue is, and we're seeing this with much of the Republican Party, this is a bipartisan immigration bill that's in the Senate. We have Republicans coming forward that are in favor of changing the policy, James Lankford being one. And he's calling out his party saying, hey, listen, this has a lot of what we'd like to see in an immigration bill. It's an increase in border agents, an increase in asylum officers, an increase in detention beds, and so on and so forth. This is what we want. We need to support it. These guys have to remember that they took an oath to the Constitution. And so, you know, the progressives have to understand that many Republicans are playing politics right now, as Rina pointed out, and that they're going to have to get in line if they want or have any hopes of having a realistic working immigration bill going forward for the future. I mean, this is the state of politics in America today, and they have to understand that. So this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, well, as you point out, it's playing politics. As Rina pointed out as well, it's very politicized. But to what extent is President Biden's embrace of this draft bill tied to his re-election bid? I mean, we've seen his approval ratings have plummeted 38 points in January, partly because of his handling of the border crisis.
Yes, and I don't put too much stock in the polls this early out. I saw something else where we were looking like Biden is down in the polls. It's February of election year, people. We live in a very fast-moving, overcrowded news cycle. So a lot of the stuff that's happening now won't necessarily affect Biden in November. But at the same time, this is a crisis situation. We have some immigrants that, undocumented immigrants that allegedly attacked New York police officers in New York recently. The governor came out and spoke against that. So the moderate and the center of the party understands that we're at crisis levels and that Biden needs to do something about it. And this bipartisan bill really gives him an avenue to make some real solid, comprehensive immigration reform while he's in office.
Art, good to see you, Art. Been some time. Republicans are moving ahead with their efforts to impeach the Secretary for Homeland Security, Alexandra Mayorkas, as Rina mentioned a moment ago. They want to impeach him over his handling of the border crisis. Now, if he's impeached, it would be only the second time a cabinet member has been impeached in history. I mean, is this a fair move on the part of the Republicans, or are they basically abusing the impeachment process?
The American people, Democrats, independents, Republicans, are livid. They are upset that President Biden has failed and Secretary Mayorkas in securing the border. President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas have an oath in the Constitution to protect, especially President Biden, to protect our country, and he has failed. President Biden withdrew all of President Trump's immigration policies that had controlled the border, and now we have 8 to 10 million illegals in the United States. We see it every day on TV and the news. Some of them are terrorists. About 200 of them are on the list of terrorists. I mean, this is ridiculous. The American people, including many Democrats that we've seen in Chicago, in New York, and in other major Democratic cities, they are sick and tired of having all of these folks coming in illegally. And the reality is that I'm a son of immigrants. We need immigration, but we need legal immigration. We need to know who is coming to our country. We have an open border policy. That's why the Republicans want to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. And it's unfortunate, but he has failed to do his job.
Art, on the immigration bill, I mean, President Biden's on board. We have bipartisan support in the United States Senate. The only stumbling block appears to be Republicans, some Republicans.
That is a cop-out. That's not true. So someone should whisper in President Biden's ear and tell him, listen, you are the president, and there are executive orders that you could take to protect the border, just like President Trump did when he was president. Someone should tell him that.
Yeah, but my question is, why don't Republicans in the House agree to this as well?
Well, because right now there's a political process that after 8 to 10 million illegal immigrants have come into the country, now we need a bill from Congress because it's Congress's fault. I mean, the American people can see through this charade. This is not true. President Biden has executive powers, as President Trump did, to close the border and stop letting all of these criminals from Venezuela come in. Not all of them, but many are criminals that Mr. Maduro, who's a dictator in Venezuela, it's emptying out the mental institutions and the jails. You know, someone should,
Rafael,
close the border.
Yeah, Rafael, you know, we talked about President Biden's approval ratings a moment ago, and as Douglas pointed out, we're 10 months away from the presidential election. But how much of a priority is the immigration issue? I mean, could this election effectively be won or lost on immigration?
Right now, immigration is one of the most important issues, mainly because a lot of other issues that were used to attack President Biden aren't as salient now, namely inflation. I do want to make a clarification, though, and even paraphrasing a former Trump administration official, the border today is as militarized and closed and shut down as it has ever been in the entire history of U.S.-Mexico relationship, period, full stop. There is no open border. There are continued.
One moment, Art, I'll get to you.
Coming into the United States.
Art, I will get to you. Rafael, go ahead.
President Biden.
There are continued violations of human rights on both sides of the border by officials from both countries. So really, to say that the border is open right now is just a reflection of how politicized this issue has become. And the reality is, well, reality has left the building if we're talking about the border and immigration.
Okay, Art, a quick response from you.
8 to 10 million illegals come into the United States when President Trump was president. True or false? False. He had a secure border, and what we see now is an open border, Rafael. I mean, turn on your TV every day, and you'll see the masses of people coming into the United States. No one knows who they are because they don't have ID.
All right, I want to move. I want to move on to some other aspects of the presidential race. Douglas, the Democratic presidential primary in the state of South Carolina, that takes place on Saturday. The result is a foregone conclusion. President Biden will get the state's delegates. Remember that it was South Carolina that entrenched his position as the nominee in 2020. But this is 2024. There are different circumstances right now. Can he still count on the African-American vote as he did in 2020? Because recent polls show that he is 21% below the average among African-Americans, but that's nationally.
Yes. Well, as I said earlier, we're 10 months out from the general election, so I don't really put too much stock in the polls at this point. I am old enough to remember that Mitt Romney was leading President Obama in virtually all the polls back in 2012, and President Obama beat Mitt Romney by 332 votes, electoral votes to 206. So that wasn't necessarily a close election, and it really put some of the polls to shame. I don't anticipate Biden having a problem with the black vote. Black people are not going to come out and vote for Trump. There's plenty of time to right the ship if indeed you can say that it's wrong. I don't believe that it's wrong. I don't put any stock in the polls this early out, but there's plenty of time. We live in a very robust news cycle, and you're going to more likely pay attention to some of the polls and other indicators that are important much closer to the election in September and October as opposed to February. So the black vote, as it has always been, will be in Biden's corner.
Okay, Rina, besides Trump, the remaining Republican contender for the nomination is Nikki Haley. South Carolina, of course, is her home state. That's where she was governor. She's been critical of both Trump and Biden. Let's listen to her.
Okay.
70% of Americans have told us they don't want a Trump-Biden rematch. The majority of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump. The majority of Americans disapprove of Joe Biden. Both of those presidents put us trillions of dollars in debt that our kids are never going to forgive them for. And do we really want to go forward with a country in disarray and a world on fire with two candidates in their 80s?
So right now, Rina, it looks like Trump may get the nomination, the Republican nomination, but Haley is polling better than Trump when it comes to a one-to-one matchup against President Biden. So is she getting more and more support now from independents?
Well, statistically speaking, you look at the numbers out of New Hampshire, and the Haley campaign has a lot to be excited about. Independents went with Nikki Haley. And let's not forget, these are just 2 states that have already voted. There are loads of delegates up for grabs. It's over 1,200 delegates one needs in order to win the nomination outright. And just this week, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney has come out saying that she believes that Nikki Haley should remain in this race up until and through Super Tuesday. See the result there. And that's something that I've been saying for quite some time. From the strategy class, I have been in the very minority for expressing that view, but I genuinely believe that South Carolina, even if it's a state she cannot win, despite being the former governor, a beloved governor, she could pick up the delegates needed to go on to be successful and potentially win the nomination on Super Tuesday. And just to remind our viewers, that's when you've got loads of races coast to coast, many of them winner take all, but lots of delegates up for grab. And so if you're looking at the electoral math, you're looking at the delegate math, it's not all bad news for Nikki Haley. And look, I have not personally endorsed her, but there is an appetite. She is right. There are high disapproval ratings for both Biden and Trump when you look across the board. And I don't put my stock in just one poll, but I am going to say that when you look at this polling that continues to be done for Nikki Haley up against Biden or another Dem challenger, you are seeing her close the gap. And that means something, because Trump, though he might be mighty right now in certain states with certain segments of the GOP, whoever's answering the polls, I tend to think it's the more hard right respondents right now. There will come a time, if he does pick up more delegates as the spring goes on, that in the summer he would see a dip in support. And so, look, let's not also forget he's complicated by numerous legal matters. He could get a conviction in one of these trials that goes. And here we are. It's a unique moment in history, and so Nikki Haley does have an opening.
All right, let me ask Art about this and Trump's chances. Art, there was a poll done by Bloomberg and Morning Consult. I mean, this is the data we have right now. They conducted these polls in 7 swing states. That's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. In all these states, Trump is ahead of Biden. But as Rina pointed out a moment ago, Trump is also facing legal challenges. And we look at another poll, 53% of voters in swing states say they would refuse to vote for Trump if he is convicted. So where does that leave him?
Absolutely. Look, the reality is that politics is all about timing, right? And this is President Trump's timing. The majority of the American people, at least Republicans, some independents, and conservative Democrats, want to change. They're sick and tired of the immigration, of the crime, of the poor education, so on and so forth, inflation. So they want to change, and that change is President Trump. And I know that the Democrats and the liberal media have a dream to have Nikki Haley as the nominee for the Republican Party. That is not a reality at this time. That is not where the American people, the American voters are. There are many in the political cemetery that have gone against President Trump. You have Liz Cheney, you have Chris Christie, you have Mitt Romney, you have Adam Kinzinger. We have a lot of bodies in the political cemetery because the Republican Party, the American people, voters, want President Trump because he was a former president. He's dealt with Leader Xi, with Kim Jong-un, with President Putin, with all these major leaders, with Iran, the mullahs there. He has dealt with all these leaders, and he kept us out of wars. And what do we see right now? We see the Middle East in chaos. We see the war with Russia and Ukraine. The whole world is upside down, and people trust President Trump, and that's why he has the support, as you stated in the polls, that the American people want to support him.
Okay. Douglas, President Biden has another problem. That is the Arab American vote, the Muslim vote in some of the key states as well. I mean, to look at Michigan, he was there. He received the support of the United Auto Workers Union there, but his motorcade, when he went there, reportedly had to take side streets to avoid protesters who were demonstrating against his support for Israel. Then we had a situation which we saw over the past few days in which women, Muslim women who were clad in hijabs were refused entry into a democratic election event that was in Nevada. The women who were disinvited, in fact, said that it was racist. What does this mean for Biden? Is he going to pay at the ballot box and pay pretty heavily for his continued support for Israel?
Well, regarding this issue, I will concede that Biden does have a problem. There is a significant portion of people that were his supporters that are very upset with how he has been handling the situation in Israel. However, once again, we are in February. There's plenty of time to right the ship here. If Israel, say hypothetically, pulls out of Gaza in March, that leaves a good 8 months for that relationship to be repaired. So we don't know what Israel's going to do, and obviously Joe Biden or the United States doesn't have any control. Right. However, this is a political situation where you never quite know what's going to happen. My bet is on Biden being able to prepare that relationship, and I say that because the alternative being Donald Trump is completely anti-Muslim and anti-progressive. Okay. So he's talking about instituting a Muslim ban.
Right. So Douglas, I've only got a minute left. All right, I've only got a minute left. I want to go to Rafael very quickly. Rafael, is President Biden going to be able to repair this broken relationship with the Arab Americans with Muslims in America?
Well, like Doug said, that relationship with Muslims in America, the relationship he's breaking with a lot of progressives and a lot of Hispanics over his immigration policies. Yeah, he can repair them, and Doug is right. The big difference there is that the alternative is most likely former President Trump.
Okay, that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.